would like to take a moment to share some of my story with you and to reflect upon my faith journey. And this is so you can get to know me, and in the process, I can get to know you a little better. I love stories, and I'm always interested to hear others' stories about their faith experiences and their religious background. Some of you may be familiar with Krista Tippett's radio show On Being, where she interviews all kinds of interesting people. And she always starts out her interviews with the same question. Tell me about the spiritual or religious background of your childhood. Like many Americans, my religious upbringing was a bit of a hodgepodge. I was raised Episcopalian, which was my father's denomination, but had the benefit of going to my family's church, my mother's family's church, which was congregational, and which also felt like home to me. I was born in Boston, and then we moved around a lot, so unlike some of you, I didn't have the experience of growing up in a youth group or a consistent place of worship, but for holidays we would usually visit with my mom's family, and I envied my cousins when they would talk about the friends they made and the interesting things they got to do in church fellowship. What I sensed was that they had a community in which to learn and to try out their faith. When I was 7 years old, my family moved from the safe, almost idyllic environment of an American suburb to Greece. It was a jarring move, and many aspects of this unfamiliar culture were strange and forbidding. On quiet afternoons when the neighborhood was closed up for siesta, I explored the local Orthodox church, completely fascinated by the rich sights, smells, and luminous silence. I learned all the saints and their stories because they were told on the walls in mosaics and frescoes and icons, and I could name all the icons. I became such a regular visitor that the sexton gave me my own chores. He had me sweeping the chapel. Even though I was in a strange culture and an equally strange church environment, I found refuge in the presence of something innately familiar, the presence of God. It was here that I was introduced to the mystical aspect of God, and it's something that has stayed with me ever since that time when I was small. As a teenager and young student, I was inspired by the mystical poems of W.B. Yeats and resolved to become a poet. I traveled to Ireland and wrote poems about my travels, about Greece, the way that it was a biblical land, arid and bloody, inhabited by shepherds and fishermen. I pursued my poetry studies and earned a Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing. Writing was a spiritual practice, but a solitary practice, and it felt only partly satisfying. I taught college English to millennials at a big university, and I loved teaching them the mystical experiences of literature. My teaching career was rewarding, but it felt limited in terms of really expressing my spiritual gifts and aspirations. It wasn't until I found a church home many years later, Hope Central Church in Jamaica Plain, a congregational church, UCC church, that I saw a model for what I could do within a community of faith. And that was a profound change to me. This wasn't anything like the churches of my upbringing, although I continue to cherish my connection to those traditions. The congregation was diverse racially, economically, in age, family makeup, and sexual orientation. It was and is a church committed to racial justice, interfaith dialogue, and being a relevant sanctuary in its urban neighborhood. I had the opportunity of joining a congregation committed to studying the sacred texts and exploring their meaning in our lived reality. Once I found the right place to land, many of the random pieces and events of my life started to feel more connected and began to make sense. My faith journey in the past 10 years has been a process of bringing my personal spirituality and community back together to integrate them both into my life. I was challenged to apply to seminary, and I'm now an MDiv student at BU School of Theology. Once I had a model of ministry that I could relate to, I began to hope that I might serve in a role where my writing, my scholarship, and my experience of the presence of God in community and in spiritual practice could all come together. And these are some of the reasons why I have come to be with you as a student minister for FCC of Milton, to learn and grow in my faith by serving a community of people who also wish to learn and grow in their faith. I thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to getting to know all of you.
Good morning. All right, I have to start out with a quick survey. So if you have ever played baseball or softball, or if you know the rules to baseball, will you raise your hand? Okay. And if you have ever played soccer, or you know the rules to soccer, raise your hand. All right, it's about an even split. I'm gonna go with baseball for our conversation. So pretend for a second that I don't know how to play baseball. Who wants to explain part of the game to me? Okay. So there's a pitcher and a batter, and the pitcher throws the ball, and the batter tries to hit it and then run around the bases. Is that all I need to know? What else? Someone else, yeah. Okay, and what's a ball? Okay. So 3 strikes and you're out, but 4 balls and you get to go to first base. This is a lot to keep track of. One more rule that I need to know? Yeah? So there's a field, and if you hit it into the field, you get to run to the bases? Okay. Yeah, one more maybe. You have to respect the other players. That's a really important rule in any game that we play, definitely. All right, so I know that there's probably a lot more rules, but I got to tell you, I'm already a little bit confused. There's a lot to keep track of, right? I mean, if you watch a baseball game, there's a lot going on, a lot of rules to remember. If someone catches the ball, then you're out, but if it goes on the ground, then you can run. It's all really confusing. Sometimes when there's a game that has a lot of rules, it can be a little confusing, and if you've never played the game before, it's hard to sort of find your way to be a part of it, right? Because you don't know all of the rules. Well, I wanted to tell you a story today about a time that Jesus was with his disciples, and he was teaching them all of the things that they needed to do in order to live a good life and to be good people. And there were a lot of things to remember, a lot of things that they were supposed to do and a lot of things that they weren't supposed to do. So Jesus wanted to make it as simple as possible. And he said, you know what? You just need to know one rule. There's one rule, and if you know this rule, then you can remember all the other ones. Who has an idea what that one rule might be? One rule. If you remember this one, don't hit anybody. That's definitely one of the rules. Very good. Do you remember, and anyone who was in Sunday school last week might remember too, I think you were talking about this. Yes. Be peaceful, yeah. Be respectful. So the rule that Jesus told his friends was, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And if you remember that one rule, then it'll help you remember all of the other things that you should do in order to be a good person and a good part of your community. And I know that that rule that we call the golden rule is going to be a really important part of your Sunday school lessons this year too. So let's say a prayer together. God, our lives are complicated. Thank you for making it a little more simple for us to remember how you want us to live. Bless these children and bless their time together in classes today. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. You can go to your classes. Thank you.
God's Holy Spirit will guide you in everything.
The Bible is full of music. There are stories about singing angels, their songs echoing across heaven. There's a story about women who take out tambourines to sing with joy after Israel escapes from Egypt. The prophet Isaiah doesn't just leave it to people, but calls on the mountains and the forests to sing God's praises. And Jesus tells his detractors that if all people were to fall silent, then the stones themselves would sing. Today's reading comes from the time when the temple in Jerusalem had just been completed and King David is giving instructions to the priests who will tend to the temple. And one of the very first instructions that he gives to them is this: sing. Sing to God. Sing a new song. Praise God. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Tell of God's salvation forever. Sing, sing. I can tell you this without a doubt. The Bible wants you to sing. So it's a good thing that we are right in the middle of singing season. Right in the middle of singing season. Do you not know about singing season? No? It's sort of a local phenomenon in Boston. Singing season. It's that wonderful time of year when most nights about 35,000 people gather in Fenway Park. And I know that most of them aren't there to sing, but when the seventh inning rolls around, they will all dutifully stand up, and about half of them will sing along as the organist plays "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." But at the end of the eighth, well, that's when it really gets started. Because for whatever reason, that's when everyone sings "Sweet Caroline." If you've ever been there and heard the sound of 35,000 voices in unison singing, "Oh, oh, oh," so good, so good, so good, you know that it is quite the experience. But sadly, around here, after October ends, the tarp gets pulled over the field for the winter, and most of us don't sing again until the spring. Of course, it wasn't always like that. Communal singing used to be a really important part of American life. It was something that friends might do when they were together, something that was a part of just about every public event or civic function. People would come together and sing. But for now, it seems like we've largely relegated that experience to the ballpark. A few years ago, I was at an evening church service, a simple service. There were no instruments, no piano, no organ. We had to make all the music ourselves, just about 20 of us. And the person leading the music had the 20 of us all stand in a circle and face each other to sing. I can see some of you squirming at the thought of it. And I actually like singing, but I was pretty uncomfortable. So this man, Patrick, he was leading us, and he started us up, and the response was, well, tepid. Nobody sang loudly because nobody actually wanted anyone to hear them. We all wanted to start softly, play it safe, see what everyone else was going to do, make sure we didn't embarrass ourselves by being the overenthusiastic one. So a few notes in, he cut us off. He let that silence hang in the air for a moment, and then he said to us, "If anyone ever told you that you can't sing, they were lying to you. You can sing, so sing out." That was it. He started us up again, and it was beautiful. And when I say beautiful, I don't mean that it was flawless. I don't mean even that it was in tune. There were mistakes. My voice cracked on the high notes, which you've probably heard before. It's not a great sound. Our breaths were all over the place. Our diction was sloppy, but it was beautiful. The experience was beautiful because when each one of us decided to sing out rather than hold back, to not wait to see what everyone else was going to do, but to take the lead and sing with all our hearts, we gave ourselves to one another in a way that shifted the whole energy of the room. That first time we were uncertain, we were doubting ourselves, we were feeling self-conscious, but that second time, we were joyful. We trusted each other. We felt conscious of our connection with one another, and dare I even say, conscious of the presence of God. All because Patrick told us to sing out. And it wasn't about making a beautiful song. It was about what that beautiful song made us to each other. Back in 2013, a group of researchers at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, led by a man named Bjorn Vikhoff, decided to test out a hypothesis. They had a theory that singing might have health benefits. And what's more, they thought that maybe singing in a group would have greater health benefits than singing alone. After all, every culture sings, and music tends to be relaxing, and at the very least, it keeps our lungs strong. So to start out their study, they brought in a high school choir from a nearby town, and they wired them up with all kinds of machines. EKGs to monitor their hearts, and EEG to monitor their brain waves, cameras that could sense changes in their skin temperature. You name it, they had it covered. And once all these kids were hooked up, they had them stand and start to sing through their repertoire. Most of the results were just as they expected. As the choir began to sing together, markers of stress went down, the students were more relaxed, the patterns of activity on the various monitors became a little more regular. But there was one outcome that stunned the researchers, something that no one was expecting. And that is that about just a moment into the first song, all the singers' heartbeats started to synchronize with each other. They tested it just to be sure, and again, it took just a few seconds before the indecipherable jumble on the heart monitor started to line up into an orderly series of peaks. Across the whole choir, their hearts were beating as one. So there it is, proof. You don't often get that from me. Proof from a scientific journal that the way that my heart feels when I sing with you is not in my imagination. I don't know if the research has ever been conducted at this scale, but I suppose it follows that the next time the Red Sox are at Fenway Park and everyone is belting out Sweet Caroline without any trepidation at all, 30,000 hearts beating as one because of a song. Can you imagine? Mary Ludi is a United Church of Christ pastor. She was a colleague of mine at my last church. She used to teach at Andover Newton Theological School. In 1990, 3 members of the faculty and the president of the school all died, each quickly and each unexpectedly. At the president, George Peck's funeral, they decided that they were going to sing all of his favorite hymns, which he had made well known to them all over the years, including his absolute favorite, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." Unfortunately for Mary, she'd always hated that hymn. She thought it was old-fashioned, the idea of a bunch of helpless people, hopeless until, as she says in a way that only she can, Christ swooshes down like a holy swashbuckler to rescue us all. But on that day, besieged by death, exhausted by grief, and living with the scary realization that in fact they were all pretty powerless, Mary said, "I found I needed some swooping and swashbuckling. So I took a deep breath," she says, "and I belted out that embarrassing old hymn. I sang it like I loved it. I sang it like I'd always loved it, like I actually believed it. I sang it with all my heart." And I have to tell you the end of this story in her words. She says, "And then it happened. We got to that part about demons snatching us, and we actually felt the claws grab us, and we were trembling. And we sang about God sending Christ to help us, and we felt a mighty presence swoosh into the room. We sang that God is a mighty fortress, and a protective steel cage descended, and you could hear it clang down. And the more we sang, the more the demons ran. And to this day, I remember the way that we climbed on the pews and thrust our fists in the air and ordered the forces of death to back off." Okay, I lied. We didn't applaud. Nobody stood on the pews, and nobody thrust their fist in the air. But we did sing. We sang and we sang, and somehow, because we sang, we won. Now, I got to tell you, I'm with Mary on all of this. I'm with Mary in my feeling that sometimes some of the songs that we sing here at church are a little dusty, and they seem like they're from a different age. I think plenty of them are a little overdue for some updated lyrics. But like her, I have also met the power of these songs firsthand. Even when I trip over the words or miss a note, these sacred songs make my heart beat in time with God's, make our hearts beat in time with one another. They make our hearts aware of the presence of the living God. But don't take my word for it. We've got a few more chances even today to test the theory for ourselves. I'm not hooking anyone up to a heart monitor, but why don't you see if you can feel it? One last word from me. If anyone ever told you that you can't sing, they were lying to you. You can sing. So sing out.
Ave Maria, piena di grazia, eletta fra le spose la Vergine sei tu. Sia benedetto il frutto, o benedetta, di tue materne viscere, Gesù. Ave Maria,